we've got an actual date for that one and an actual date for for the fight and jealousy. So it's like phew, a lot of the times I'm having to deal with, a few days is the description, which Alyssa, I'm sure you can explain how many a few days is.
It's a pair. It's more than. It's at least 3.
That's the one. You are the expert on that.
Sometimes I forget how thorough Softie's knowledge of the podcast is.
It's dangerous.
It is very dangerous. Hey guys, welcome to Breakfast in Beauclair, a Global Witcher podcast. My name is Alyssa from Good Morn, and I'll be your host as you, I, and our international Hansa accompany Geralt of Rivia and his destiny, Cyrilla of Sintra, across the continent. It has been 2 weeks since our last episode, and we are 2 weeks closer to the English edition of Crossroads of Ravens, which is out on September 30th. And now we have the wonderful news that Netflix's The Witcher Season 4 will be out this October 30th in just a few short weeks. On that note, we're looking forward to covering it on the podcast, of course, and I will keep you updated in regards to how, when the podcast coverage will happen. The next 2 days, The Witcher in concert is here in New York City, both in Newark as well as Brooklyn. If you're listening and you're in the Brooklyn area, you can catch me at the Brooklyn show on Saturday, September 20th. It has been so lovely to see everybody's photos and videos from around the world as they've been enjoying this concert, and I'm so excited to share my experiences with you after the show. And lastly, again, Lengthy Tangent is still crowdfunding for our latest seasons of audio fiction. I am so excited to share with you guys what we've been working on. You can listen to Peculiar Radio Season 1, as well as the first few episodes of Theme Party of the podcast, wherever you're listening to Breakfast in Beauclair. You can support the campaign by looking for Lengthy Tangent 2025 on Indiegogo. Thank you so much to our patrons and our producer-level patrons, Katie the Redhead of Toussaint, Jacob B., Charlotte from Bangberg Glamorai, The Original Brooch, Libby, John of Riblia, Tom from Australia, Jill Kate the Tabby Witch, Ollie from Sweden, James Carson III, Miriam of Temeria, Softie, Lisa C., and Born Orpheus. If you would like to learn more about supporting Breakfast in Beauclair, visit patreon.com/Breakfast in Beauclair. As for this episode, Abbe from Sweden and Softie from the UK, call in for Andrzej Sapkowski's Tower of Swallows, Chapter 2, Part 1. Join us as we discuss ominous foreshadowing, groupthink and survival, transactions versus ideals, stolen identity, dreams of grandeur, and that one little turd I have no feelings for, I'm afraid. Without further ado, let's get to our discussion of Andrzej Sapkowski's Tower of Swallows, Chapter 2, Part 1. Hey guys, welcome to Breakfast in Beauclair. My name is Alyssa, and today we're welcoming 2 members of our Hansa to the show. You'll recognize both of my guests from their most recent appearance on the podcast in episode 104, Chapter 7 from Baptism of Fire. My first guest is an aspiring music teacher from Sweden. He loves arranging and composing music and playing board games and video games. You'll recognize my second guest from episodes 71 and 77, although he'll be a staple this season. He's a squall developer for an educational charity and can often be found hiking, reading, painting miniatures, and worrying about the football results. Please welcome back Abbe from Sweden and Softie from the UK. Hi, guys.
Hey, Alyssa.
Hello.
Hi, it's so funny having you both back. I actually completely forgot that you were both just on. So in podcast land, it's just 2 episodes ago. I think it's probably closer to 6 to 9 months since we last had a conversation.
Indeed.
Yeah, what have you guys been up to, Abbe?
Last episode that we recorded, I had just moved into my new place. I had been there for like 4 days or something. But now, of course, I've been living here for a half a year now. So it feels a sort of returning point to the start of my journey in this town. I've just been studying. I've been working this summer at a hospital. Otherwise, nothing much. It's not been that much time, but also, again, time is a weird thing. It feels like a long time ago, but also last week ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are you looking forward to in like your upcoming year of music studies? How much time do you have left on your degree?
I have 2 years left. It's a 5-year program, but I'm really just looking forward to learning, which I guess is what you do at university. It's supposed to be like a bit more chill year, which I'm really looking forward to. But also, like it starts getting really serious, which is both amazing but also scary because now I'm supposed to know stuff. I'm supposed to be getting ready to do actual work, which is awesome. I'm really looking forward to it, but it's also scary to like step into that world of realness.
Have you managed to avoid that terrible thing when you're halfway through training and suddenly decide it's not for you anymore?
Oh, I got through that phase.
Well done.
Thankfully, yeah. If I'm to stop, this is the point to stop. This is when I should say, you know what, this was fun, but now I should do something else. Also, since I'm running on like the student loan, that's only for a certain amount of years that you can get that here in Sweden. It also becomes a financial thing. Like, okay, well, if this is what I'm supposed to do, then I won't be able to study anything else for like quote unquote free. But yeah, I'm very happy where I am, and I'm looking forward to trying to actually work with it as well.
Amazing. Thanks for sharing what's been happening with you lately, Abe. Softie, I'm really excited to see you again as well because for this season, I have the absolute pleasure of inviting you and Kitty on as co-hosts for this season, which is really exciting. And listeners, you'll be hearing Softie and Kitty across the whole season. It's been such a delight to see both of you take the initiative to like host your own book clubs in the Hansa Discord. And I genuinely cannot thank you both enough for continuing to like engage with this community, to host your own discussions, to build up the members of our Hansa and just make sure that everybody's enjoying themselves. It really just genuinely means so much to me as oh my God, I'm about to cry. We celebrated the 6th anniversary of the podcast yesterday. Oh my God, I'm crying. And as my life has changed, I'm so happy that you guys can continue to like invest in the community and like be that for them.
We're so grateful to you. Just letting us do our thing is really kind of you. You didn't have to. It felt really kind of creepy. It's like, by the way, you've got this amazing podcast. Can we just come along behind you and cover the same things you've already covered just to go into it with some more,
Oh, no, it's perfect. You guys are so good at it and such a great addition to our community. For people who actually don't know, do you mind like telling them about the work that you and Kitty have been doing and the sessions you run?
Yeah, so it's evolved a little bit. To begin with, it was just, hey, is it all right if we just sort of see if anyone wants to meet up and talk about things? Because
Yeah.
I'm sure I'm not the only one who sort of came along. The podcast had been going for a bit before I found it. It was amazing, to listen to all these people and feel like you really got to meet them and know them, like Charlotte of Vengerberg and
Yeah.
stuff. It was, such a funny and engaging person to listen to. It was just awesome. And so many great guests. It was lovely because you're listening and it's like, well, I know these books or I've seen the show and things. And it's like, oh, this is great listening to people's take. And then you just have that funny little thing. Oh, I wish I could have contributed a little bit. It's like, oh, I'd like to go into that a bit more. Or I'd never thought of that. And, I'd like to explore it further. And
Yeah.
it's like, what other way was there to do it than to, so didn't want to steal your thunder, didn't want to go ahead of you. Obviously. So the best thing was that let's just follow on behind.
Yeah.
And we tried a couple of cross-cutting theme ones across the saga, but those are harder to do without spoilers. So we just thought the easiest thing was to, hey, let's just keep it simple. Let's go through the short stories one after the other. Yeah, we're going to come to the end of those soon. So then we've got to decide what to do next.
I know. What are you guys going to do?
I think it'll depend on how far you've got in the main thing. So
Yeah. It is the beauty of the Witcher sagas that it just doesn't end. We thought it ended, and then it's continuing to go with Crossroads of Ravens. So we are very spoiled for material, I think. For people who have never attended one of your discussions, what can they expect? What do you guys talk about? What was one of your favorite moments from a discussion?
all my favorite moments are when people log in and join us and just hit us with something we didn't know or hadn't thought of, or it's almost always going to be someone who's read the books in another language who just are able to drop some amazing piece of knowledge on us that we just didn't know about, that just completely changes your whole understanding. Or just daft things like, the fact that in Italian, scoia'tael means squirrel, and it's like, oh, okay, or something like it, But it's mostly when people are able to put us straight on, where the translation has gone awry, or someone drops in a folk story that has never made it through into English because it never went in with the group of fairy tales that we adopted. And it's absolutely the story from The Witcher that's being subverted in one of the short stories, and you've just never heard the story before.
Yeah.
So you picked up on lots of other things that it was doing, but just wasn't aware that the whole thing was based on a well-known story. that kind of stuff is always the best. I think Kitty and I are just simply addicts. The problem is it's kind of a methadone fix because it's not the main podcast. It's like the best we can do under the circumstances. But the fun thing is, you can drop in or out as you see fit. You're not missing out if you can't make it, but if you can, you'll be more than welcome.
It's interesting the level of engagement that people crave. If you watched the show, if you read the books, and that is not enough, then you go seek out like a podcast, you seek out discussion forums, and then you get into the podcast and that's not enough. So then you join the Discord, and then you're listening to the podcast and you want to shout back and interject and like wave your cane at the radio, and then you're like, this is not enough, and then start discussions as well. And it's so joyful. And so much fun, I think. And part of the reason why I started the show, and I'm sure part of the reason why you and Kitty started the discussion series as well, is just like bringing in different perspectives and like different mythologies and cultures in such a pan-European story is so fascinating. I think unlocks so much in terms of like history, culture, and the arts. And yeah, what a nice little thing we've got going. Thanks, Sapkowski. Today, we'll continue our discussion of Andrzej Sapkowski's Tower of Swallows with Chapter 2, in which Hotspur warns the rats that Bonhart is hunting them. Ciri leaves intending to reclaim her throne, but goes back for her friends, and Bonhart slaughters the rats. Here's a quick synopsis of the chapter from future Alyssa. In Chapter 2 of Tower of Swallows, we open on a storm and the dangerous riders passing through it. We meet Hotspur, who finds Ciri and the rats at a riverside postal station, high on drugs as they're each tattooed. He has a quid pro quo relationship with the rats, trading them information for favors. Hotspur warns them that beyond the prefect of Amarillo, the Varhagans, and the Baron of Cassidy, they are now hunted by the infamous bounty hunter Bonhart, someone only the rich and powerful can afford. He also claims that amnesty will soon be granted, as the Emperor of Nilfgaard intends to marry Princess Thrilla of Sintra. Realizing an impostor has taken her identity, Ciri seethes. Hotspur departs, telling them Bonhart waits in the town of Jealousy. The rats decide to confront him, but Ciri slips away, planning to reclaim her throne and return a hero. Missile catches her, and Ciri begs her to survive. Ciri catches Hotspur, who offers cynical advice for claiming amnesty. They are ambushed by horsemen, and Hotspur is mortally wounded. In the morning, Ciri claims his beautiful mare and names her Kelpie. Ignoring his warning, she desperately rides to Jealousy in an attempt to intercept the rats. But the rats arrive before her and call Bonhart from the inn. Ciri arrives too late. Bonhart has killed them all. Enraged, Ciri engages Bonhart in a duel neither can win. Eventually, she's forced to watch him behead each of her companions. Ciri recounts the memory of his Sagoda, mourning the loss of her friends and lover in the cottage no one can see. So now that we have gotten a very thorough recap of the chapter from future Alyssa, Abbe, Softie, I'd love to hear from you. What were some of your overall thoughts from the chapter and any highlights or lowlights?
This book in general, to my mind, is where Sapkowski's really come into his full powers. He is just showing off. In this chapter, he's starting slow, and the first chapter he begins it really with the storytelling perspective jumping around. The fact that this is non-linear, and he keeps changing the perspective of the storyteller. In this one, he only does it sort of 3 or 4 phase shifts, but it's seamless. I mean, the story just continues as normal. The next chapter, he just goes crazy. He's just showing off from chapter 3 onwards. It's just madness, that he is someone reading from a diary and then it switches to the person writing the diary in real time, being told off by people for not paying attention. It's just like, wow. In this one, we've got Ciri talking to Visigotta, and then it jumps through to literally the description of the events that she started talking about, and then we'll cut through to someone being actually interviewed by Stefan Skellen and hearing the story from them, and it's the same story being told throughout. You never lose your place, even though it's jumping around. It's really, really strong, the writing. You can't help but be impressed by it.
I can only agree. I'm always just amazed with the small details of when in the beginning of the chapter you get introduced to Hotspur. I guess we're following his perspective of his events when he enters the town. He gets confronted with his people, and then you notice the name Falca and you realize, oh, that's Ciri, but she's never mentioned as Ciri, of course. But it's such a relief later after Ciri's discussion with Visigotta, how it switches to Ciri's perspective, and you're like, finally, like we're getting like her thoughts on the actual situation that they're in. So I love that. And also just regarding Ciri, it starts obviously a lot before, but this is sort of where her story really starts to deepen. And it's a huge turning point for her. I mean, we've had a lot of turning points for her She's just trying to run away, and then she's had a bit of like peace, I guess, in a way. But now things just go to the shit, basically. Yeah, it's definitely not a fun chapter. It's quite heavy, but it's very important nonetheless.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like if we follow Ciri as the true protagonist of The Witcher, which, some people debate, but I think it is true, all of Tower of Swallows very much feels like the heart of darkness of her arc. She is at the absolute lowest she will be. And I think the interesting thing about the way that the framing narrative works, coincidentally, I've been getting a lot of TED Talks around like PTSD and like self-worth and like all that stuff. There was one I happened to be listening to before recording where it kind of talks about how, like, to paraphrase, PTSD is just kind of like the continual like rhythm of going through your trauma just again and again and again after the inciting event. As she's retelling this story to Visigoda and then we're experiencing it in real time, it is an entire book of just rehashing the same trauma over and over and over again, both in the past and in the present. And I didn't really have this perspective when we recorded chapter 1, although that's where this framing narrative started. But I do find that whether or not Sapkowski intended that to be the case, I find that rhythm as a reader very empathetic with, I think, what Ciri is going through. Because I think, as we discover, she becomes quite detached at a certain point of her reality, and we're watching her processes with Visigoda, which we'll discuss later. I think the other thing about this chapter is, of course, the slaughter of the rats. And again, we'll talk about what this means, but that's something that whenever I've read this book, I feel like I've had to read that section multiple times because it's just so horrifyingly brutal. I think in my memory, it's been a while since I'd read Tower of Swallows. I thought it was further along in the book. And then it like hit me at chapter 2 and I was like, oh my God, what the fuck is in the rest of the book?
It's not even Ciri's first tranche of trauma either, is it?
Yeah.
She's had a lot of this. The writing captures the idea that you get stuck in this awful psychic loop with trauma that you just can't seem to break out of it. It will just keep repeating and it keeps you frozen in aspect, so you don't move on. You kind of stay the same age. The terrible things that have happened, you actually respond to the stimulus that reminds you of those things being the same age you were when those awful things happened to you. And we get a lovely example of that in the story here, I think, which I'm sure we'll come to.
At this point, I'd love to move to the discussion questions as well. So the first one, the chapter opens with an image of a storm and its dangerous riders. We never learn for certain who the riders are, but what tone does this set for the chapter, and how does it foreshadow the events to come?
My first thought was definitely that it was referring to the rats getting to the village. They were literally referred to as the gang. We have one gang that we're talking about generally in this chapter, but it's very interesting seeing how they are reflected in others' eyes, which, like always, Sapkowski writes in a brilliant way. Also, I heard Sapkowski in an interview, he referred to writing Ciri as a sort of representation of evil, while Geralt was supposed to be the voice of good. Obviously, she isn't evil per se, but I can see how the things that she's had to experience has made her a sort of mirror, I guess, for all of the evils coming towards her. So she's just sort of absorbing it and having to deal with it in the most horrible way.
Absorb is a good word, because I always remember when Alyssa in the podcast, one of the very first ones, referred to Ciri as this little sponge who just soaks up everything around her. And, that always stuck with me, that's how I always think of the character. It's a lovely description and it makes sense of so much of what she does. But yeah, I was also shocked by that, Ciri's evil. Really? What? When you wrote the book, you're allowed to say these things, but my goodness, that's that's never been my takeaway.
It definitely has a lot more to say about these things.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about this section is that we see more explicitly in the middle of the chapter when Hotspur is at the post office that the rats feel so invincible. Obviously, we see the chapter ends with like the slaughter of them at the hands of Bonhart. But I think, as you said, it's like you're seeing them from a completely different perspective. And while Ciri, understandably sees herself as a hero and sees herself as like a vigilante and like the protagonist of this story, and we tend to see her in that way. it does, again, remind you like the horror and the terror that they inflict, if it is the rats, assuming it is, that they inflict on the villages around them. Maybe they're not so great, I think, despite what they choose to believe about themselves. And I think that idea of invincibility, they are compared to magical specters like the Wild Hunt, which have always been a part of the fable on the continent. And so knowing that they're only human, and I think having that be like the unintended moral of this chapter really starts here.
The way the book begins in itself does that very clever thing. There's all the people jumping out of bed,
Yeah.
on the 23rd of September, because all the characters you've met Siri jump out of bed. We get introduced to all the people that we know have some relationship to her.
And their lovers. Yeah.
And that one obviously has the Wild Hunt riding through it. So it's kind of suggested that here's the list of dramatis personae. So when you suddenly hear about riders coming through, it's deliberate. You should be thinking of the Wild Hunt. But then, of course, are they being chased or are they the chasers? Is it the hunter or the hunted? And then you suddenly get their perspective. It doesn't matter. To us guys, it's just hide, do not go out of your doors.
Yeah.
Riders coming through at night is not good news for us, whoever it is. Let's just hope they don't set fire to the village. That's kind of all they can hold out for. Which is pretty awful to see it from that side, I think. Typical Sapkowski to, just throw you that slightly different perspective than you've been used to. It's not just the main characters we've got to think about. It's all these poor guys in the background. They have to live here.
It makes a bit more understanding of like how, I guess, xenophobic, like basically everyone is, because a stranger means either burn the village, robbery, or something else. Hopefully they just walk by, but it's a very low chance.
Yeah. So Hotspur's relationship with the rats is very transactional, and because we're with him in his perspective, he describes it as such. While Siri sees the rats as like free and independent, how does this tension reflect broader themes of loyalty, hypocrisy, and survival?
On the most basic level, we're quite used to this, that he'll give someone a sense of something that, this is a truth, and then he'll instantly, if it's black and white, let's turn it grey for you. And he does it every time. Here's Siri with this romantic ideal about, this kind of Robin Hood idea that, we're the fearless rats who ride out, we thumb our noses in the face of danger and steal from these grasping merchants and then distribute it amongst the poor because we are marvellous. And then, of course, here they are. She finds that Hotspur is actually working for the Merchants Guild. And his job is to get them quietly on the side to go and attack the merchants that aren't part of the guild. And they're really working for the Merchants Guild, just not officially, just in the shadows, that they're assassins. And that's a bit of a blow to her. But is it any different to the Valley of the Flowers, where the Queen of the Elves is set up? And no, you're not really in charge at all.
Yeah.
It's so long as you do what Emir wants, the square tail can't come home. They've got to stay out in the forests. No control at all. And it's the same there. Looks like freedom on the surface, and you could present it as that, as a romantic ideal, but there's no romance in these stories. It's very real.
Yeah, it goes back to, I think it's Mistel. She says something about you're always somebody's puppet. And I think she sort of accepts that idea, while Siri is very reluctant to that sort of thinking. Maybe seeing how she's always been trying to get away from being controlled. This thought of, wait, so we're actually not totally free to do whatever we want. It makes sense that she feels bad about it.
I feel like it's that idea, not dissimilar from Francesca and Nilfgaard. Freedom still has a cost. It doesn't come for free. And so like the rats being bankrolled or having any sense of safety and security comes from the cost of obviously working for someone else. And I wonder to what extent Siri had been kind of protected from that as the youngest, as the newest. It's that illusion of freedom. And I think that at some point Sapkowski said, I believe it's at the end of the last book, when Nimue is by the fire and she gets a little snippet from the old storyteller. Siri had caught a whiff of the robber's life and was running around as Falca. There's like kind of a reality and a sharp contrast to that romanticism versus what she actually experiences.
It's an interesting reality that they're building up for themselves. It's a very good example of something that we've read about quite a bit when it comes to groups. And for me specifically, studying to become a teacher, we've read a lot about like how classes works, which also tends to be how do groups work? How do groups within groups work? What happens when you take out one person in the group? It also depends on what kind of person they are, what role they have in the group, and so on. There's also a consequence to when a group starts escalating, I suppose, within their thoughts and stuff. It's called groupthink, which is, like I said, more of a consequence than that of a way of thinking. It has three symptoms, I guess, which is a overestimation of the group's abilities. We can check that one off. There's a tendency to wave off warning signals. Check that one off. And also a hostility towards a specific unity, which I would say would be anything that is not considered their way of doing things. So I checked that one off as well. And so this group, the rats, they're just kind of slaves to their own thoughts that they're escalating within their own group. This is itself a consequence of how lonely they were, seeing how most of them, I think, were abandoned. They're all young people, angry at the world, whilst also simultaneously trying to find their place in it. It's a struggle between the two. And they've also learned to trust each other, and they know they have nothing.
Yeah, I feel like the idea of groupthink and the way that you laid it out is like very obvious and like very clear. So thank you for bringing that. I think it's interesting to think about that and the nuance of the discussion that they have, because their leader, I don't know if it's pronounced like Geese. It's not the way that Peter Kenny says it. I don't know how. But yeah. He's the one who has clearly like brokered this deal with Hotspur and others. He's the one that's just like, maybe we do think about that amnesty and like actually puts some thought into it. And I think on the other end, when you actually read the discussion that's happening, the rest of the rats start gassing each other up and they're like, no, we're invincible. No, we can have our revenge and vengeance against Bonhart.
Yeah.
No one else can touch us. And then he loses control of the group. And I wonder, especially when you talk about groupthink, is that a symptom of, I guess, the intention of where it starts versus what happens when it becomes almost like too insular, just watching that kind of like get away from him. And of course, by the end of the chapter, he has still gone along with it and goes down fighting with the rest of the rats. But goodness, it's just like watching a car crash, seeing how invulnerable they feel.
It was really interesting reading what you said about groupthink, because I hadn't heard of that before. So it made me go back, partly because I was trying to draw a proper timeline so that we could work out, the fact that it's non-linear storytelling, but just how non-linear is it? When you go down and start making a diary by day from the insurrection at Thanet and just follow it all through, it's remarkable, who's meant to be where on different days and the traveling times in between and stuff. It's really interesting. It meant that I had to go back, and you realize that there's been like a jump cut from chapter 7 of Time of Contempt for these guys. That was when we last really spent time with them. We've had people seeing visions of them in dreams and stuff, and we've had little flashes of them, but we haven't really spent time with them. When you say with groupthink, they had a weird ceremony for Ciri. They had all found each other, the 6 originally, and then they were like this group against the world. And then they all, one after another, said, I was alone. Here, have this. And they gave her a dagger or a brooch or a hat with a feather in and stuff. These were presented to her one by one as gifts from the other members of the rats to welcome her into the party. So it's so odd that in such a short time they've developed a ceremony to welcoming a new member, and they're all kids, really. I don't know if it was deliberate, but it reminds me from Dune, where Paul Atreides first kills a Fremen in hand-to-hand combat. And then they have this big ceremony, I was a friend of Jarmis, each person says, and takes an item of his belongings. So it works the other way around. It's taking something from the dead to remember them by. And everyone's waiting for Paul to do his bit. He also has to say he was a friend, but he doesn't know that. And it just comes to him naturally that he does the right thing. But it's interesting. It's the other way around. There's quite a lot of inversion here. The way Ciri's seeing them as these noble people and stuff is she's punching upwards at this point. She's at her lowest ebb there. She's got nothing. And she's thinking of them as punching the world, and this is great. Really, what is it? It works the other way around. It's big fleas have little fleas upon their backs to bite them. Little fleas have smaller fleas on ad infinitum, that normally you see it from the other way downwards, and it's interesting again to have this view, bottom up for a change.
I think that's a very nice segue into the next question, just because Ciri has come so far and she is brought back very abruptly. I think similarly to what you had said, Softie, like there's a moment where she's suddenly a child again, or she's suddenly Cintran again. And when Ciri hears that an imposter has claimed her identity, she reacts with anger and resolve. What does this moment reveal about her sense of self and also her connection to Sintra?
This was certainly where I was thinking about the experience of her grandmother being slaughtered and being caught in the fires in Sintra and everything and trying to escape, and reminding her again of Cahir, the winged knight, all these things that she's had. It just puts her in that childish frame of mind, like, I'm going to go and be the princess again,
Yeah.
And she says to Visigotta, because he's frankly taking the piss out of her at this point, oh, so how did it go when you went to go and reclaim your inheritance, sort of thing, and she says, yeah, I was cleverer in the Temple of Melitele and Kaer Morhen, and it's coded because she's talking about places, but she's talking about Kaer Morhen for when she was with Geralt, and Temple of Melitele where she was with Yennefer. This is childish throwing off of her parents, basically. She felt abandoned by them in the Korath Desert. This is kicking back against that as well. Everyone's lied to me. I've been left alone again. And she's gone back into being this child again. And then she has this childish tantrum, which makes perfect sense when set against all the things she's been through.
I really agree with the thing of her just getting thrown back into Sintra. We mentioned before, like, how it can be when it comes to traumas or PTSD, where you start recollecting different memories. And I think the word Sintra is very much a trigger for her. Maybe like in her state of mind, when she hears that, she's brought back, reawakening her traumas.
I think when we look at just what has happened to Sintrans in general, chapters 4 and 5 of Baptism of Fire is when Geralt meets Marshal Visigurd, who has something against him and is Sintran through and through. And you see what happens with all of the foot soldiers who have been displaced from Sintra, and they still feel this huge loyalty for the country and the Sintran throne. For Ciri, it is obviously and understandably significantly more personal. One, because she was the princess, she was the Lion Cub of Sintra, and whether or not she knows it at this time, the war is about her specifically, and not just, Sintra as a country. Obviously for her, as both of you have said, when she personally knows the lies and the untruths that have spread around what had happened, and then, of course, knows very, very personally that regardless of Emir claiming to marry this newly found Cirilla of Sintra, she's like, that's absolute bullshit. I'm here sleeping in the dirt, not showering for days. And she feels a sense of privilege and of right. Someone else has claimed my throne. Someone else has claimed my inheritance. That's an absolute lie. I deserve it all back. And I think all of that is incredibly understandable with the shade of trauma as well, feeling like you have lost out on something that you deserve. I'm sure that time shift has a huge part to play in it because she hasn't really thought about Sintra. She had, as you mentioned, Softie, the whole process of acceptance when she was with the Witchers, when she was with Yennefer. It's like she hasn't really thought about it. She knew that wasn't going to happen, and then it was just triggered again. But I wonder to what extent that connection is still really there. If it's more about connection to her country or more about her right to claim the throne.
She's basically turning into the same bratty little thing she was in Broccolon, isn't she? Which is telling her, well, I'm going to have your head cut off when we get back to Grandmama. How dare you speak to me like that? You've got no idea what's coming your way, pal. No thought that, she's in the middle of nowhere depending on this guy to get anywhere at all. So it's not the first time she's had this either, because the Baron of Cassade's, was it niece or daughter in the carriage where she's saying, I am, the daughter of, oh, that means nothing to me. That's anyone can say that. I'm an actual princess,
The quote was something along the lines of a baron's daughter. What a petty title. If you knew who I was, you would have your face down, ass up, bowing down to me. Screw you. And then, just absolute entitlement. Which, again, might not be undeserved, but it is certainly mistimed.
Throughout this whole section where she starts getting more and more worked up about all of these lies, I was so stressed. I was any second I felt like she would say something that would lead, especially Hotspur, he seems to know his way around. If she gets too mad and accidentally says something she's not supposed to, he might draw together the dots. So that really scared me when I was reading, and it's weird feeling so alone with that fear, because all of the other characters that were with, none of them know. They don't know her true identity, I suppose.
It's like a reader's privilege and a curse.
Yeah, definitely.
And you might think that taking little snorts of fist tech isn't actually helping her keep her, self-regard under control either.
Yeah, definitely not.
You'd think. That certainly takes us to, I guess, her decision to ultimately leave the rats as well, coming off of this in belief that she can then claim her inheritance. We're told that she sneaks out in the night. She is caught by Missel. Ciri and Missel's farewell is brief but emotional. How would you say their relationship has evolved? And what does Ciri's plea for Missel's survival say about her priorities?
For me, it felt strange for her to be leaving this group that she's been for such a long time. She started caring about these people, even though for me it felt like maybe she didn't join them because she had a sort of pirate's dream within her own life. It was a safety measure to be joining them, and eventually it became a comfort, even a weird sort of little family. Perhaps she started caring about them and she wants a better life for them. So I'm thinking her plan was to get to Sintra, claim the throne. She's thinking very just like, this is what I'm gonna do. Get the throne, get them back, throw like expensive ropes on them, and we'll all live happily together.
I feel like I've definitely spoken about Yzma from Emperor's New Groove a couple of times on the podcast, but it does feel like that same element of planning. Oh, I'm just going to go to the nearest town, and then obviously they're going to believe that I am the Princess of Sintra and not just an insanely delusioned, ill young woman, and then they're going to take me to Emir, personally, in Nilfgaard, and I can claim my throne, and then I'm going to go back, and then all the rats will be there, and I'm going to come in on carriages, and everything in that plan has to go perfectly according to what's in her head for any of that to be a reality. Obviously, this book and this chapter are tragedies. I do think that, again, however delusional it may be, the belief that Ciri can go claim her throne, I think both her actions as well as Missel's response share and illustrate a level of hope. Ciri really believes that she can make life better for them. I think, again, whatever you think about the rats. And I think Missel as well, she knows Ciri's going to leave, and I think she has some resolution about it that she may not see Ciri again. But I think that there is still an element of hope in their survival and even, their leader's belief in even considering amnesty. I think even if they hadn't been caught by Bonhart, it sounds like something might have changed.
Yeah, it's quite a poignant parting, really, though, isn't it? Considering that relationship between Ciri and Missel didn't exactly start in the nicest way that you could imagine. Even going back to that, where at first Ciri thought she was protecting her from Kayleigh, which definitely needed to be done. There's one little turd I have no feelings for at all, I'm afraid. She obviously also took advantage of her fear and everything. But it was noticeable that the next morning, Ciri, when she woke up, actually kisses Missel on the head, which I don't think is, sorry, Abe, I shouldn't say the Stockholm Syndrome. I don't know if that's something you're not supposed to say to someone from Sweden.
Very much fun.
Okay. But yeah, and then she goes and watches herself in the stream where she's obviously feeling quite traumatized and horrified and disgusted by everything that's happened to her in the last few days. But gradually over time, and I don't think you would say that she just hangs around with Missel to keep men away from her. There is some affection there, but Missel keeps trying to touch her and wants to kiss and things all the time. She sometimes pushes her off. It's that sadness in the parting. Was that why you were so nice to me today then, for the first time in so many days? Was it just goodbye? Which just showed it's not a loveless relationship. The way I read it is that Ciri loves Missel as a dear friend, and she may wish to be lovers occasionally with her, but I don't think she's in love with her. Whereas I think Missel is in love with Ciri, and I think that's why it's hurting her. It's that cloying side of the relationship that Ciri doesn't like, the controlling side, or your mind. It's like, no, I'm still me sort of thing, which these are all natural things, So it's quite sweet in some ways to see them coming out, even in such a messed up paradigm that they're in. It was quite hurtful. If you think about it, it wasn't even their parting, really, was it? There was a little bit more to come.
Yeah. I mean, like any relationship between two people, romantic or otherwise, is just so complicated. Yeah, just thinking about their desires and their hope for each other. We spend the rest of the book really understanding, I think, the depth of that grief for Ciri.
Especially for Missel, she even says something along the lines of, if we meet again, or something like that. For her, it really is a departure for good. Even though she's hopeful that she might see Ciri again, She's not as ambitious as Siri in her plan. She doesn't have as much confidence in the plan, even though she doesn't know of it.
Hey guys, this is 11 o'clock at night, Alyssa, remembering that I forgot to record an outro for this. So we will continue our discussion of Andrzej Sapkowski's Tower of Swallows, Chapter 2, in the next episode. Thanks for joining us at The Breakfast Table. For show notes, transcripts of each episode, complete lists of our social platforms and listening services, head over to breakfastandbeauclair.com. Breakfast and Beauclair is created by Alyssa from Good Morning. It's hosted by Alyssa. The show is edited by Alyssa and Kayla Buys with music by Alex Berner. Breakfast and Beauclair is produced by Alyssa in New York City with Katie the Redheaded Toussaint, Jacob B. Charlotte from Egberg Glamorai, the original Roach, Libby, John Friblia, Tom from Australia, Jill Kate the Tabby Witch, Ollie from Sweden, James Carson III, Miriam Tamaria, Softie, Lisa C. and Born Orpheus. Special thanks to Abbe and Softie for joining us for this episode and our international Hansa for their support.